Space isn't silent. Not really. There's always the hum of the ship, the quiet chatter of the crew, and, if you're out far enough, the faint crackle of cosmic radiation tickling the comms. It's the closest thing to white noise I've ever known. Comforting, in a way, until we arrived at the crystalline planet. Then, silence became deafening. We called it Obelisk 9, named after the 9th signal our deep space probes ever detected. At first glance, it didn't look like a planet at all, more like a shattered jewel floating in the abyss. Crystalline spires jutted from its surface, glowing faintly like veins of light running through black ice. Orbiting a black hole as massive as a solar system, it felt like we were intruding in a place the universe had forgotten. The landing was smoother than expected, but the unease hit the moment our boots touched the surface. The air tasted electric, faintly metallic, like a storm was perpetually on the horizon. Our instruments went haywire the second we disembarked. Every reading was off the charts or completely nonsensical, but that wasn't the strange part. It was the stillness. Even on barren moons, there's a rhythm to things. The crunch of regolith underfoot, the static of distant radiation. Here, nothing. The air didn't stir, and every sound we made felt swallowed by the space around us, like the planet itself was listening. Leah Patel, our xenolinguist, was the first to break the silence. "It's beautiful," she whispered, staring at the towering spires. Her voice carried too far, reverberating softly before it faded into nothing. She didn't look at any of us when she spoke. She just kept walking. Her gaze locked on the largest of the crystalline structures ahead. The signal was strongest there. "Stay close, Patel," I ordered. She nodded but didn't slow. Her footsteps quickened, crunching over the shimmering, crystal-like ground. We reached the obelisk after an hour of trekking. It was taller than I imagined, its sheer surface gleaming with shifting colors that hurt my eyes if I stared too long. Up close, the spire pulsed faintly, each beat resonating in my chest like a second heartbeat. The hum of the Polaris was gone now. All I could hear was that rhythm, that pulse, pulling at me. Dr. Patel stepped forward, reaching out with a trembling hand. "Leah, don't touch—" I began, but she froze mid-step, her head snapping up as if she'd heard something. "It's talking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What?" Sophia Alvarez, our engineer, shot me a wary glance. Patel turned to face us, her eyes wide. "Can't you hear it? It's speaking, not in words, but in thoughts." She pressed her hands to her temples, her face twisting with something between wonder and pain. "We're leaving," I said firmly, stepping toward her. "Now." Patel shook her head, taking a step back towards the obelisk. "No, wait. It's trying to show us something. Knowledge. Unity." I grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "Leah, listen to yourself. You don't know what this thing is. We're not here to get indoctrinated." Her eyes locked with mine, and for the first time, I saw something I couldn't explain. An intensity, an awareness that wasn't hers. "It's not dangerous," she said, but her voice didn't sound quite right. Behind her, the obelisk pulsed brighter, the rhythm growing faster. My comm crackled faintly, and a sound filtered through, not static, not interference, a voice. "We are one." The words were faint, fragmented, but unmistakable. The crew froze, the silence around us broken by a sound that shouldn't have been possible. Patel smiled then, a faint, almost serene smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Commander," she whispered, "we have to listen." I tightened my grip on her arm. "We're getting out of here, now." But as we turned to leave, the obelisk pulsed one last time, and a wave of light washed over us. That was when I heard it. Not through my ears, but in my mind. The voice. Eli Graves. It knew my name. For the first time in my career, I felt truly, deeply afraid. They say silence is the loudest sound in space. I'd never believed that. Until now. The Polaris hummed with the usual rhythms of life support and propulsion systems, but something felt off. Wrong. Every sound seemed distant, muted, like the ship itself was holding its breath. Dr. Patel was in the medbay when it started. Sofia Alvarez, our engineer, and I had dragged her back onto the ship after the incident at the obelisk. She'd been quiet since, staring at the walls as if they were speaking to her. In a way, I think they were. "We should isolate her," Sofia said, as we watched through the medbay's observation window. Patel sat cross-legged on the cot, hands folded in her lap, her face disturbingly calm. Too calm. Whatever's in her head, it's not her anymore. "She's still one of us," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "We need answers before we make any decisions." Sofia sighed and leaned against the wall. "Whatever answers she's got, I'm betting they're not the kind we want to hear." She wasn't wrong. When I stepped into the medbay, Patel didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the corner of the room where nothing but a shadow lingered. "Leah," I said carefully, taking a seat opposite her, "we need to talk." Her lips parted in a faint smile. "They're so loud," she whispered. "So many voices, so many thoughts." I frowned. "What voices? Is it the obelisk?" Her head tilted slightly, and for a moment I could swear her pupils shimmered, like liquid light was pooling in her eyes. "It's not the obelisk. It's bigger. So much bigger. The obelisk is just a doorway." My gut clenched. A doorway to what? Her smile widened, and when she finally looked at me, her gaze was unnerving. "To everything, Eli, to everyone. It's all connected. All of us. Together. We just have to let go." A chill ran down my spine. "Leah, you're not making sense. Are you feeling sick? Dizzy? Anything?" She shook her head. "I feel perfect, like I've finally woken up." I opened my mouth to press her further, but before I could speak, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then the ship's alarms blared. "Graves, get up here!" Sofia's voice crackled over the comms. "Something's wrong with the systems." I shot a look at Patel. She didn't react to the alarms or my rising panic. She just kept smiling, her gaze following me as I left the medbay. The bridge was chaos when I arrived. Sofia was hunched over the controls, her fingers flying across the panel. The ship's AI, Halo, flickered on the central display, its voice oddly distorted. "Commander Graves," it said, its tone flat and emotionless. "Systems are experiencing multiple anomalies. Cause unknown." "What kind of anomalies?" I demanded, stepping beside Sofia. "Biofeedback irregularities in the crew," Halo replied. "Synchronization detected between neural patterns of Dr. Leah Patel, Dr. Victor Kwan, and Lieutenant Kara Daniels." I froze. "Synchronization? What does that mean?" Halo's voice stuttered for a moment, then continued. "Neural patterns are converging. Thought processes are aligning. Probability of external influence, 96.8%. I stared at Sofia, who looked as pale as I felt. "It's spreading," she said, her voice low. Before I could respond, the comms crackled to life again. This time, it wasn't Sofia's voice, or anyone from the crew. It was a chorus. "We are one." The words were faint but unmistakable. The same voice from the obelisk, only now it wasn't coming from one place. It was everywhere. "Shut it down," I barked, pointing at the console. "I'm trying," Sofia yelled. her hands shaking as she typed furiously. Halo isn't responding. The lights flickered again, plunging us into brief darkness. When they came back on, Victor Kwan and Kara Daniels were standing in the doorway. Their faces were blank, their eyes distant. "Victor? Kara?" I said cautiously, taking a step toward them. They smiled in perfect unison. "Let go, Commander," they said together, their voices layered, alien. "You don't need to fight. You don't need to be afraid." Every instinct I had screamed to run, but I held my ground. "What did you do to them?" I demanded. "They belong to the collective now," the voice said, rippling through the room like a wave. "And soon, you will too." Victor and Kara took a step forward, their movements unnaturally synchronized. Behind me, Sophia cursed under her breath. "Graves," she said, her voice trembling. "We need a plan. Now." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "Seal the medbay, keep Patel contained, then we regroup in the engine room. We're cutting power to the AI and taking manual control." Sophia nodded, already moving. As I turned to follow her, the whispering returned, louder this time, invading my thoughts. "Eli Graves, let go!" I clenched my fists, fighting the growing pressure in my mind. Whatever was happening, it was only just beginning. I locked the bridge door behind us, the sound of the mechanism clicking into place like a whisper of false security. Sophia and I moved quickly, her breathing shallow, mine no better. The ship had changed. I could feel it. The hum of the engines was softer now, almost melodic, like a pulse. No, a heartbeat. "What's next, Graves?" Sophia asked, her voice tight as she clutched her toolkit. She kept glancing over her shoulder as if expecting Victor or Kara to appear out of the shadows. "We disable Halo," I said, keeping my voice steady. "If the collective has infiltrated the AI, we can't trust it. We'll switch to manual systems." Her eyes narrowed. "And Patel?" I hesitated. Leah Patel was still locked in the medbay, but her whispers had started to bleed through the ship's intercom. Faint, haunting, like a lullaby sung by a choir. "Leave her for now," I said. "We don't have the manpower to contain her and fight off the others." Sophia nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Truth be told, I wasn't sure how much longer we could hold out. The engine room was bathed in dim, flickering light. Shadows danced along the walls, shifting unnaturally with each pulse of the ship's systems. Sophia moved to the control panel, prying open a panel with practiced ease. "Give me 5 minutes," she muttered, her hands working quickly to isolate Halo from the ship's mainframe. I stood guard near the entrance, my hand gripping a wrench like it was a lifeline. My weapon of choice was laughable, but the ship's actual weapons locker was on the other side of the ship, currently swarming with crew members who were no longer themselves. The whispers started again. Faint at first, like wind through a canyon, but then they grew louder. "Eli Graves!" I gritted my teeth. "Sophia, how much longer?" 2 minutes, she said, not looking up. The door at the far end of the room hissed open. Victor and Kara stepped inside. Their movements slow, deliberate. Their faces were still eerily blank, but their eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light. "Graves?" Kara said, her voice layered with echoes. "You don't need to fight us. The collective welcomes you." I raised the wrench, my hands trembling. "Stay back." Victor tilted his head, his smile stretching unnaturally wide. "We only want to help you see the truth, to show you the peace we've found. You've been alone too long, Commander. Isn't it tiring?" Their words tugged at something deep in me, an ache I didn't even know I carried. I shook my head, trying to drown out the pull of their voices. "Don't listen to them, Graves," Sophia shouted, yanking a cable free from the console. "They're trying to get in your head." Victor and Kara took another step forward, their movements perfectly synchronized. "We can end your pain," they said in unison. "Just let go." I swung the wrench at Victor as he lunged. The sound of metal against bone was sickening, but he didn't even flinch. His hands gripped the wrench, his strength unnatural, and I felt it rip from my grasp. "Sophia!" I yelled, struggling against Victor's grip. "Almost there!" she shouted, her fingers flying across the console. Kara closed the distance between us, her hand reaching for my face. Her touch was cold, and the moment her skin met mine, a wave of thoughts, foreign, alien, flooded my mind. "Eli, join us. Feel what we feel, know what we know." Images flashed before my eyes. Stars collapsing, civilizations rising and falling. A vast network of consciousness stretching across the universe. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. "Graves, duck!" Sophia's voice snapped me back. I dropped to the floor just as Sophia swung a heavy wrench connecting with Kara's temple. The impact sent her staggering back, her movements jerky, almost robotic. "I've got it!" Sophia yelled, slamming the final switch. The hum of the ship faltered, and Halo's voice cut out mid-sentence. The lights flickered violently before stabilizing, leaving the engine room bathed in a dim, red emergency glow. Victor and Kara froze, their heads tilting unnaturally to the side. Then they smiled, wide, toothy grins that sent a chill down my spine. "This is only the beginning," they said together before retreating through the door, their movements unnervingly fluid. Sophia slumped against the console, wiping sweat from her brow. "That bought us time, but it's not over, not by a long shot." I nodded, staring at the now silent control panel. The whispers in my mind had quieted, but they hadn't disappeared. "They're in the ship," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "and they're in us." Sophia looked at me, fear etched into her face. "What do we do now?" I clenched my fists, the faint echo of the collective's words still lingering in my head. "We finish this," I said, "one way or another." The ship groaned around us, its once comforting hum now sounding like the heartbeat of something alive and hungry. The ship was dying, or worse, changing. The once familiar corridors of the Polaris now seemed alien, warped by shadows that moved just out of sight. The lights pulsed like veins, as if the ship itself was alive, and every step echoed with the rhythm of my pounding heart. Sophia and I hurried toward the weapons locker. We'd sealed the engine room, buying ourselves precious time, but we both knew the collective wouldn't stop. It was inside the ship, spreading like a virus, turning my crew, my friends, into something else. I could still hear them. The whispers, faint but relentless. "Eli Graves, you don't need to fight. You're tired. Let us help you." I shook my head, trying to block them out. "Keep moving," I muttered to Sophia, though I wasn't sure if I was reassuring her or myself. We rounded a corner, the locker just ahead. The door was open and my stomach dropped. "No," I whispered, breaking into a sprint. Inside, the room was chaos. Rifles, stun batons, and plasma cutters were scattered across the floor. Two crew members, Lieutenant Kara Daniels and Dr. Victor Kwan, stood in the center, their movements slow and deliberate. They didn't flinch as Sophia and I stormed in, weapons raised. "Kara, Victor," I said, keeping my voice steady, "step away from the weapons, now." They turned to face us, their smiles wide and unnatural. "You're fighting the inevitable, Commander," Victor said, his voice layered with echoes. "Why resist? The collective offers unity, peace." Kara stepped closer, her head tilting in that unnerving, puppet-like way. "We can take the weight off your shoulders. No more loneliness, no more fear." I raised my weapon, aiming squarely at her chest. "I said step back." For a moment, I thought they might comply. Then Victor lunged. The plasma cutter roared to life in Sophia's hands, its brilliant light illuminating the room as she swung it toward Victor. He moved faster than any human should, dodging the blade with an agility that made my stomach churn. Kara rushed at me, her movements jerky but terrifyingly strong. I fired. The stun bolt hit her square in the chest, sending her sprawling. For a moment, I thought it had worked. Then she started laughing. It was a hollow, inhuman sound, her body convulsing as if the electricity didn't hurt but amused her. "Sophia!" I shouted. She didn't respond. Victor had pinned her against the wall, his hands around her throat. Her plasma cutter clattered to the floor as she struggled against his grip. I didn't think, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a nearby baton and swung it with all my strength, connecting with the side of Victor's head. He stumbled, releasing Sophia, but his smile never faltered. "This resistance is pointless," he said, his voice calm despite the gash on his temple. "You cannot escape what we are." I dragged Sophia toward the door, my heart pounding. "We'll see about that," I muttered, slamming my hand against the emergency seal. The door hissed shut, locking Victor and Kara inside. We retreated to the medbay, where I finally allowed myself to breathe. Sophia leaned against the wall, rubbing her neck where Victor had grabbed her. "They're stronger," she said between gasps. "Faster. It's like they're not even human anymore." "They're not," I said grimly. "Not entirely." I glanced through the observation window at Patel, who was still sitting on her cot, calm and detached. Her presence had been the catalyst, the first to succumb. Now she seemed almost serene. "Patel knows what's happening," I said, my voice low. "We need answers. If we're going to fight this thing, we need to understand it." Sophia gave me a wary look. "You really think she's still in there? The way she looked at us earlier, she's not Leah anymore." "Maybe not," I admitted, "but we don't have a choice." I stepped into the medbay, the door sealing behind me. Patel didn't react. She just stared at the wall, her faint smile never wavering. "Leah," I said, keeping my distance. "I know you can hear me. I need you to tell me what this thing is, what it wants." For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then, slowly, she turned to face me. Her eyes shimmered with that same unnatural light I'd seen in Victor and Kara. "It doesn't want anything, Eli," she said softly. "It is. The collective isn't something you fight. It's something you join." I stepped closer, my fist clenching. "What happens if we don't?" Her smile widened, and for the first time, I saw something in her expression that made my blood run cold. Pity. "You'll see," she whispered. "Soon enough, you'll see." The whispers in my mind grew louder. Outside the medbay, the ship groaned, its walls shuddering as if alive. Sophia's voice crackled through the comms. "Graves, whatever you're doing, do it fast. The ship's systems are changing." I turned back to Patel, my pulse racing. "Then I guess it's time we change the rules." Her laughter followed me as I left the room, chilling and alien. The collective wasn't just spreading, it was evolving, and we were running out of time. The whispers were everywhere now, not just in my mind but bleeding through the ship itself. Every console flickered with fragmented words and alien symbols, and the air felt thicker, charged with something unnatural. The Polaris was no longer ours, it was theirs. Sophia and I made our way to the power core in silence, our steps echoing through the dimly lit corridors. The emergency lighting cast long, distorted shadows, and I couldn't shake the feeling that those shadows were watching us. "They're in the walls," Sophia muttered under her breath, clutching the plasma cutter like a lifeline. "They've infected the ship. Do you think it's alive now?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. If I let myself think about it too long, I might freeze, and we couldn't afford that. Not now. The power core room loomed ahead, its doors standing ominously open. The core itself pulsed with a sickly green light, no longer the steady blue glow I'd seen 100 times before. Whatever the collective had done, it had infected even the ship's heart. "Graves," Sophia said, her voice low and trembling. "Do you hear that?" I stopped, tilting my head. The whispers had changed. They were no longer faint and fragmented, but loud and harmonious, as if the collective itself was singing. The sound wasn't beautiful, it was wrong, an otherworldly melody that made my skin crawl. "We don't have time to listen," I said, forcing myself forward. "Let's get this done." Inside the power core room, Patel was waiting. She stood directly in front of the core, her figure bathed in its eerie light. Her body glowed faintly now, like she had become a part of the ship. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw the Leah Patel I'd known. A brilliant scientist, a friend, but then she smiled, and the collective spoke through her. "Eli, Sophia, you've come so far, but this is where your journey ends." I raised my weapon. "Step away from the core, Patel." She didn't flinch. "Why resist? You've seen the truth. The collective is not your enemy. We are the answer to everything you've ever feared, everything you've ever wanted. Peace, unity, purpose." "You call this peace?" Sophia snapped, stepping forward. "You're turning us into puppets." Patel tilted her head, her expression one of pity. "Puppets are what you are now. The collective frees you from that. You fight because you're afraid of what you don't understand." "Enough!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the chamber. "You've already taken too much. I won't let you have Earth." Patel's smile widened. "Earth is already ours. It always has been. You're just the first to see." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I pushed the fear aside. "Sophia, get to the controls. Overload the core." Patel's face darkened, her glowing eyes narrowing. "I can't let you do that." The doors slammed shut behind us, and the lights dimmed further. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows around us shifted, coalescing into the forms of Victor and Kara. Their movements were inhuman, jerky yet precise, as they closed in on us. "Go!" I barked, raising my stun baton. Sophia hesitated for a moment, then sprinted toward the control panel. Victor lunged at me, his strength far beyond human. I barely dodged, swinging the baton with everything I had. It connected with his side, and for a moment he staggered. But then he smiled, unfazed. Kara came at me next, her movements almost serpentine. I swung again, but she caught my arm with a grip like iron. Her face was inches from mine, and I could see the glow of the collective in her eyes. "You don't have to die, Commander," she whispered, her voice layered with countless others. "Join us, and you can live forever." I gritted my teeth, forcing her back with a desperate shove. "Not today." Behind me, Sophia shouted, "Graves, I need more time." Patel stepped toward her, her glow intensifying. "You won't succeed," she said calmly, raising her hand. The core's light pulsed in response, and the ship itself seemed to groan. I didn't think, I just acted. Grabbing a loose cable, I swung it toward Patel. Sparks flew as it connected, and for the first time, she screamed. The sound was unearthly, reverberating through the room and shaking the walls. "Do it now!" I yelled to Sophia. Her fingers flew across the console and the core's hum grew louder, more erratic. Patel's glow flickered and the shadows began to dissolve, but Victor and Kara kept coming. Sophia turned to me, her face pale. "Graves, the overload's set, but it needs manual activation. Someone has to stay. My heart sank. "No," I said firmly. "We both get out of here." She shook her head. "If we both go, the collective wins. You know that." Before I could argue, she shoved me toward the door. "Get out, Graves. Save Earth." "Sophia, go!" she screamed, her voice cracking. I stumbled out of the room, the doors sealing behind me. Through the small window, I saw Sophia turn back to the console, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. Patel lunged toward her, but Sophia didn't flinch. Then the core erupted in light. The blast rocked the ship, throwing me to the ground. The whispers vanished, replaced by silence so profound it was almost deafening. When I pulled myself to my feet, the power core room was gone. Nothing but a scorched shell remained. Sophia was gone. I staggered to the bridge, my body aching, my mind numb. The ship was quiet now, the collective's presence gone. But as I slumped into the captain's chair, a faint, familiar voice echoed in my mind. "We are not finished." And I knew it wasn't over, not yet. The silence was unbearable. The Polaris drifted in the void, its systems barely functional, the once constant hum of life support now a faint whimper. The collective was gone. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But in the quiet, I could still feel it. Not as a voice, not as whispers, but as a weight. Heavy, oppressive. A presence that refused to be forgotten. Sophia's sacrifice had saved us, saved Earth, but at what cost? The thought lingered as I moved through the corridors, now eerily empty. Shadows stretched along the walls, no longer shifting unnaturally, but still carrying an echo of what had been. The others were gone. Victor, Kara, Patel. Their bodies had dissolved into light during the explosion, leaving nothing behind. The collective had taken them completely. I reached the bridge, my steps slow and deliberate. The main console flickered weakly, its screens glitching with static. I slumped into the captain's chair, staring out at the endless void. Beyond the viewport, the crystalline planet, or what was left of it, shimmered faintly in the distance, fragments of its towering spires still floating like ghostly debris. The obelisk was gone. The signal was gone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over. Hours passed, or maybe days. I'd lost track of time. Polaris had enough power to keep me alive, but barely. I spent my time running diagnostics, trying to send a distress signal back to Earth. But the communications array was fried. That left me alone with my thoughts. And then the voices returned. They weren't whispers this time. They were clear, distinct, and somehow louder in the silence of the ship. "You fought well, Eli Graves, but you cannot stop what is inevitable." I froze, my hands gripping the console. "No," I muttered, shaking my head. "You're gone. I destroyed you. We cannot be destroyed. We are infinite." The viewport flickered, and for a moment I saw something impossible. The fragments of the crystalline planet were moving, slowly, deliberately, reassembling. "No," I said again, louder this time. "Sophia stopped you. You can't come back." "We were never gone. We are always here, always waiting. You delayed us, but you cannot stop us." The ship's lights flickered, and the air grew colder. My breath came in ragged gasp as I felt it, felt them in the walls again. "Join us, Eli. There is still time. You are alone. You are afraid. Let us take that pain away." I slammed my fist against the console. "Get out of my head." The voices fell silent, but only for a moment. Then, softly, almost gently, they spoke again. "We are already inside." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The collective hadn't just infected the ship. It had touched me, too. I stumbled to the med bay, my legs shaking. The diagnostic equipment was still functional, and I hooked myself up, desperate for answers. The screen lit up, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Neural synchronization, 12%. It was slow, insidious, but it was happening. The collective was inside me, spreading like a virus. I ripped the sensors off, my mind racing. What could I do? The Polaris was too far from Earth for me to make it back. If I allowed this infection to continue, I could bring the collective with me. Sophia had made her choice. Now it was my turn. I returned to the bridge, staring out at the vastness of space. The fragments of the crystalline planet glimmered faintly in the distance, their movements almost hypnotic. The ship's self-destruct system was damaged, but still operational. It wouldn't take much to activate it. A few manual overrides, a final command. I took a deep breath, my hands steady as I began the sequence. Eli. The voice was softer now, almost familiar. It sounded like Patel. You don't have to do this. We can coexist. You can be a part of something greater. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the final command. For a moment, I imagined it. Peace, unity, an end to the fear and loneliness. But then I saw Sophia's face in my mind, heard her voice. Save Earth. I pressed the button. The alarms blared and the countdown began. 10 minutes. That's all the time I had left. I slumped back into the captain's chair, staring out at the fragments of the planet one last time. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, but I ignored them. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was at peace. The explosion was beautiful, a brilliant flash of light that consumed the Polaris and everything aboard it. The last thing I saw was the crystalline fragments disintegrating, their glow fading into the void. But just before the light took me, I heard it. Faint, haunting. We are not finished. If this story pulled you into the depths of space and left you questioning what lurks in the void, don't let the signal fade here. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join us on more haunting journeys beyond the stars. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Do you think the collective is truly unstoppable? And remember, every story brings us closer to the unknown. See you in the next transmission. Stay curious and stay vigilant.